Calling of the roll. Mr. Bramble.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Mr. Thompson, Mr. Loudermilk,
Here.
Ms. Swager, Mr. Mann,
Here.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Here.
Ms. Bennett.
Here.
Okay. Okay. Corrections to the journal of the preceding meeting of needed. We have February and
Oh, we got them in there.
March for review. I believe there's at least one correction. Is that right?
To March? Yes.
Yeah.
There are actually two. Sorry.
Okay.
First one is a change from okay. Sorry. This is this March's minutes? I'm sorry. Are these March's minutes? I have a correction to the budget adjustment meeting minutes that just passed.
The budget adjustment meeting.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. All right. When would we correct them, Mr. Bramble?
They do their budget adjustment report, I guess.
Yes.
Page 60. Okay. It's in here.
Yeah, I was talking about the one needs correcting. I have a correction on page 56. In the 20018, at the motion, in the motion statement, I believe it should say the total account shown on the sheet prepared by Calissa Miller with sales taxes excluded. Okay, if you don't mind, because yes, I think I probably said that wrong. So, yeah, so it should be excluded because the total that we're referring to had those sales taxes excluded. So, I'm sorry, Karen. And then I have one more very minor, just really typo on page 57. And it is in the the first sentence of the fourth full paragraph where it says the next category had to do with an amount change. Very minor. Thank you. So that's all.
If nothing else, no other corrections, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilwoman Wager, seconded by Councilman Schweitzer. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Loudermilk,
Aye.
Ms. Swager,
Aye.
Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to public comment. Good to see everyone. Glad you all feel comfortable with coming with our current guidelines. Public comment is via email and calls. We had not gotten any before the meeting. If people view it and have other comment that they want to make, please do. When we originally set this meeting up, it was going to be open to 25 or something like that, but we made stipulations that we could have the comment via email as well when we published the notice. So the dates were changed on the coming back to work and the public entry to the building here. So it covered us both ways. So I've got a little public comment. We had a meeting at the fair last night, and we're going to move ahead with that for July 11th. It's going to be modified, but Purdue Extension's going to have their programs in a fashion, and we're going to move ahead with the other programs. So
Carnival, and everything be there? Or?
Carnival is, at this point, yes. Yeah, at this point, yes. That's not for certain, though. They're setting up a route. And if they can make it work for a route, then they'll come through. If not, they won't. So, dependent on other communities as well. So, all right. That's, any other public comment? Not communications from elected officials. I asked our treasurer to come in, possibly give us an update on tax collections, seminars, webinars she's attended, things like that, that might give us some guidelines.
Okay, these are from the cash book, the due date of last year and this year. Okay, we was, in 2019, at 20%. Okay, in 2020, we had 5 days after, 34% last year, and 34% this year. We're still putting in bank payments. You know, it's just, one day is 3 million down, one day is 3 million up, you know. Don't really have a good number yet, but it looks like we're going to be about the same.
Wow, good.
Any questions to Nancy? Got anything from your treasurer's EIC association or anything that they're,
I know everybody seems to be doing about the same, you know, it hasn't been so bad.
man,
If I may, real quick. What percentage of the taxes coming in are escrowed, and what percentage are by non-bank, non-mortgage?
Well, we did do, we put escrow, I thought it was more than that. We did do that. Cheryl was asking us for spring of 2019, and just the spring of 2019, it was only like 6.5 million that we got, so we double that for spring and fall. Not a lot, you know, compared to taking
For which one?
for any of the escrow, you know, that's not very much of our tax dollars, you know. We're figuring like, what, 12 million?
Thank you.
Mhm.
other questions? Appreciate so much you making the effort
Yeah.
to come out this evening. I had trying times, and we'll make all this work, all
Yeah.
the different offices.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Reports?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I want
Oh,
to,
pardon me.
I want to mention that Governor Holcomb has designated the 911 dispatchers are now classified as first responders. In the past, they have been classified as secretaries and phone answerers. They are now classified as first responders. So that is something that we will have to take into consideration when we do our budget this year. But they certainly do rise to the occasion of first responders in the performance of, you know, the stress of their job and so forth. And so I think he probably performed a task there that was long overdue. We have 20 first responders and we have job openings. There's a great deal of turnover in that department, and it's because of the stress that's there and the low pay. So maybe we can address that this year.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Bennett, you have, she has a report here on, well, you can take the,
All right, thank you, thank you. And
sorry
I'll-
about that, I didn't
No,
mean to.
no, you're fine, you're fine. I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible, then maybe we'll have some time at the end of the meeting to talk about this. If you're watching this on the stream, there's a link right under the presentation for the right under the meeting link for the presentation. So this update has to do with the statement that was read last meeting in the March meeting, about making some plans with the public safety local income tax money. So part of that statement reads, "We are confident that we can use a portion of the public safety related lit funds for alternatives other than direct support of the jail. Vigo County continues to experience high rates of incarceration, and it seems prudent to explore options to lower the incarceration rates in our county." Further down, we say, "We hope to fund at least one significant program aimed at prevention and/or rehabilitation." So I know several of us have attended some webinars done by Crow and the Highway Department and some others about our budget situation, thinking about revenues and that sort of thing in this present environment. So as we know, I believe we all received an email from Calissa. She had started to do a cash flow analysis to try to look at our major funds and where we're going with revenues and expenses. So in thinking about that, I thought it might be a good idea as a follow-up to this statement that we had in March to look at that for these accounts. And so that's what I've tried to do. I'm hoping that this is timely from a budget perspective for this year. But I really think, and I hope you'll agree with me by the end of this, that it is really time to make a plan for these funds. So let's look at this. I took various and sundry inputs. There were the information from Crow. We had some estimates from Ball State about local tax impact on local tax revenue. We have some, of course, the budget is an input and that sort of thing. So I really wanted to see where we were with regard to our ability to, for example, pay our debt service. You know, if revenues are decreasing, what's that going to look like in the next couple of years? But then I had never really sat down and put all of the revenues and the expense estimates together for the jail and these public safety lit taxes. So I thought I could do that as well, and that's what I've done. So let's take a look, and I'm going to blow through these pretty quickly, but this is the format. For each year, you've got your 4 tax buckets across the top. Each of them has a specific expected revenue based on the percentage. And then expenditures, some of those we already know, some of those we can estimate. And then for each of those calculations, of course, revenue minus expenditure equals either a surplus or a deficit for that year. And then down at the bottom, since these funds roll or can roll, I thought, let's see what the accumulation starts to look like over the next several years. So these taxes were initiated in 2018. We didn't really have receipts or expenses, so that's 0 for that year. 2019, we started to see revenue. So you see that across the top. You started to see we had some project expenditures that we paid for out of those funds. But in each case, with a surplus at the end of the year. So that plus 0 from 2018 gives us the accumulation from 2018 and 19 at the bottom. We go to 20, same kind of thing. I need to say this out loud. The $5 million under the expenditure, I know we haven't voted on that yet, but to take a conservative view of what we might expend, I went ahead and included that as a subtraction. So you see the same kind of calculation, and you see the accumulated surplus at the bottom. Continuing to 21, this is where I took in the Ball State information. You'll see that revenues across the top are slightly smaller than what we saw in 2020. That's because I took the Ball State projected revenue decreases and subtracted those. So those revenues are a little bit smaller, and you see again the rolling forward. We have what in fact is our only deficit. It's an estimate, but a slight deficit in the special purpose tax, but you see that the surplus amounts continue to roll forward and in fact continue to grow. 2022, looking forward, I've kept the revenues flat. I said, let me be conservative and say that I expect a long recovery. So those are the same revenues as from 2021. And then we start to see some expenditures. We all know that the project plan for Garmong forecasts that they'll finish the jail in March. So I estimated half a year of debt service and half a year of jail operations expenses using some of the Crow figures and moving forward from there. So there's 2022, and I finally stopped at 2023 because that's the first full year of operation for the jail. So you see the revenues across the top again. I'm saying they might be back to this year's levels. We've got a full year of special purpose of the debt service. And then we've got what I think is a good solid estimate of additional costs for the larger new jail under that second column there. So now what I want us to focus on, and you all have the presentation in front of you if some of these numbers are small. These are the accumulated surpluses in each of these accounts up through 2023 if these projections hold. And I hope they're pretty solid. So we have $8 million surplus in the special purpose, about 12 in the correctional facilities, about 9 in public safety, and about 3.5 in the PSAP bucket. So what does this mean? Well, put in a kind of a blunt way, and I said it this way to sort of, not just kind of to get our attention. This means that by the end of 2023, the first full year of operation for the new jail, if Vigo County does nothing to plan for the use of these surplus public safety lit dollars, we will have overtaxed, you could look at it that way, overtaxed the people of Vigo County by about $32 million. So I want to go back through there and put some different emphasis. If the county does nothing to plan for the use of what in fact are going to be, I think, surplus public safety local income tax dollars, we will have overtaxed the people of Vigo County. So if we don't plan, it seems that we're going to have these very large surpluses, and in fact, we already do. So that's my, I hope that you would agree with me that we really have some capacity to plan, and it's time to do so. So how difficult would it be to come up with some things to do with these funds? It's a total of, again, about $32 million. These funds are available in a variety of ways to improve our criminal justice system and actually improve the lives of people in Vigo County. So let's look at the different buckets and see what we might do. These are all, from here forward, this is all just things that we've talked about or I've talked about in the Vigo County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, or people have talked about there. These are all just ideas, but there's some solid ideas out there and some solid opportunities for how we can use these funds to improve things, expand services, and so forth. This one is probably where I'm the fuzziest. This is the $3.5 million surplus estimated, again, in the PSAP fund. That is a facility. It very much depends on software. You want it to be state-of-the-art. You want it to be current. There's probably plenty of things we can plan for into the future, looking at equipment upgrades and so forth. The GIS system that I think the Highway Department is going to take advantage of could be used there too. So there are some opportunities we might want to look at. The special purpose tax. That is dedicated by code. You see the code language. That's dedicated largely to construction, but also some other verbs there. Equip, remodel, renovate. We could probably, I think we could use that to pay the bond off early if we have such a large deficit. So that, or surplus, that might be one thing we want to think about. we're all, our names are all on the lawsuit that has in part to do with the fact that our old jail, our current jail, has not been maintained adequately. So we have an opportunity, I think, to maybe create a maintenance fund. Not sure when that would start, not sure how much it would be, but thinking about things across the next 3 to 5 years, that's something that we may want to look at. And then, Aaron, you've been spearheading with others, Hamilton Center and others, some of the discussions about a diversion center. I'm not sure where that stands, but there are some facilities that divert people out of the jail that we're talking about, I think, in Vigo County, a homeless shelter, diversion center. Maybe there's some opportunities for us to take advantage of this funding for that kind of thing. The correctional facilities, this is one of the 0.2% taxes. That's dedicated to paying for correctional facilities and rehabilitation facilities. So if we think about that, maybe there's some money there that could apply once again to a homeless shelter, diversion center, some of those rehabilitative facilities. Not sure, but it might be worth thinking about. And then if we think about rehabilitation, what if we can work with some of our partners in the county to support some of their rehabilitative, sober living and other kinds of facilities? Not sure if that's possible, but it may be something we want to think about. Again, this one by 2023 might have a surplus of around $11 million in it. Finally, the public safety. This is the one that we share with the city, you'll recall. The estimated surplus here might be in the $9 million range. This one by code is stated to be for public safety purposes, so that one's a little broader. Sitting on the VCC-JCC, I would really like to see us, this is where our planning for programs and services and the expansion of those really comes into play. This one's very dear to my heart in terms of helping us to manage the growth of the jail population and helping people in our community today. So I met a couple months ago with Judges Mulliken and Roach, and I asked them at the end of our meeting, I said, what could the council do to help you all with the traffic through, the volume of traffic through the system and that sort of thing? And in about two or 3 minutes, they just started reeling off a bunch of ideas. So I just put those ideas here. There are some really good things we could do to help keep people out of the jail, to expand some of our problem-solving courts, those kinds of things. And those are all ideas that, again, were right at the top of mind for them. So it's not hard to find these opportunities. And how much money do we have for this kind of thing? When we met in March, Council President Morris and Councilman Mann, I didn't really know. To me, right now, it seems like we will have about $4 million at the end of this year that we could use to plan for these kinds of things that help divert people out of our criminal justice system. So that's a significant amount of money, to me at least, and I think it deserves action. It calls out for action. So let's look back at our summary. These are all estimates. They really deserve some more attention. I must say, Calissa was very helpful in helping me sort of sort through what some of these numbers were. Thank you, Calissa. But I think they're pretty solid for what we do, what we know right now that the jail project is in the water, and that sort of thing. So I hope that you'll agree with me that when we talked about making a plan in that statement in March, it's really time to do that. We've got some real needs in the community. I don't know why we would wait. We could push forward. We can carefully identify an amount of money that we could, in each of these funds, that we might want to dedicate to some purpose that helps us move forward. I don't see that we would have to wait for the jail to be finished. That doesn't make any sense to me. I hope it doesn't make sense to you. I hope that waiting any longer for some of these actions and some of this planning doesn't make sense to you, because I think with the amount of money that's here, waiting for something else to happen and not using these funds in ways that help our community, I don't think that's going to make sense to our taxpayers. So, I'm saying at the bottom, we must call for a planning effort to begin now. We really don't have to do anything, but I really feel like it's important for us to act in a leadership role and in a financial leadership role to make sure that this money is used wisely now and through the next couple of years. And I just frankly had no idea that it was going to be as much money as it may be. So I was so startled by that. You know, I got into this again just to see if we might have problems with the reduction in revenue covering the debt service, you know, in a couple of years from now. And I found what I think is a significantly different story out there. So I've given you in your materials a spreadsheet that's kind of the basis for these numbers. I'd be happy to answer questions or you know, take any discussion about changes. And then I also gave you kind of a straw man for how we might move forward. Put together a group, look at what our planning effort might look like, and see if we can move forward to make use of these resources. So thank you. Thank you very much. And I think we want to kind of hold questions for now and talk at the end of the meeting about some options. Thank you. Thank you, Council President Morris.
All right, thank you. Well, this is what all of us are charged with, all 7 of us, to come up with some of these ideas and see what, and help them along. I mean, it's not, okay. Did everybody get their jail update from Garmont? Okay. We did accomplish that, I think, to get a monthly update. I think we're all on the email now. Certainly costs of that or change orders or things like that or delays in construction or can have an impact on that cost of that project. All right.
Council President,
Yes,
before we move on, could I just address one thing briefly?
certainly.
Excuse me. As you recall, last year we discussed the public safety lit distributions for the fire districts and volunteer fire departments. And we had to do it around this time last year to give them ample time to set in place their plans to submit to us. I think we have until it's September 1st they have to get that to us and for us to approve that. So I have some numbers here that Melissa has worked up that will provide the breakdowns by percentage of runs like we had last year. As you recall, last year we agreed upon the 65-35 split. And as you can see, the estimated distribution for 2021 at the 65-35 split is highlighted on the sheet that I just provided to you. I would offer time for, I guess, a brief discussion about everyone's feelings. We had, I think, a robust discussion last year about why we chose 65-35 split and what that afforded to some of these smaller fire districts that didn't have quite the tax base in place of the larger ones, and it seemed like it was more advantageous to go with that split last year. If, like I said, we can discuss that at this point, but I think that we probably need to move on doing something at this point, since we are here, because we don't know what the future is going to hold the next couple of months. I know it's going to be probably difficult for us to have a public meeting. Well, I guess this is still public, but it's close to the public. But a meeting next month with the council chambers being taken over by the election. So I would encourage that we act on this tonight, which would call for a suspension of the rules. But as I said, we got a discussion about it.
Council members, are you getting up to speed? We're behind on this by about a month. We would have probably addressed this last month. Data has to get in by the fire departments and in June, I believe, and back. the arrangement seems to have been satisfactory here. We do have the dollar figures here. Let's see, do we need, Mr. Abner, do we need to try to see if we suspend the rules first to discuss this, or can we discuss it and then just suspend the rules? Okay, all right. Well, so questions or anything in reference to this?
Mr. President,
Yes.
it seemed, as they talked among themselves, they were quite satisfied that it was agreeable to all the departments that they split it 65-35, and it seemed to have worked out very well for them.
Comments back from those people? I mean, there's not been anything but,
Not any
Positive, is
problems
there?
whatsoever.
okay.
Everything I've heard since has been positive, and they've been satisfied with the way it's been distributed.
Councilperson Loudermilk, can you explain to the people that might be watching what 65R and 35L means?
So 65R is the runs. So what we did is we figured everything last year. Distribution was a combination of the run rate for that fire department or fire district, and the L represents the levy. So what we agreed upon last year was a combination of a 65, a weighted combination, 65% on the run rate, 35% on the levy.
Thank you.
And Councilperson Loudermilk.
Yes.
My recollection, I remember as you all did, that they were quite satisfied. And I think that calculation sort of kind of flattened some of the disparity between the levy impact for, let's say, Honey Creek and the run impact for Sugar Creek, and Honey Creek seemed very happy to let it play out like that.
Yeah, they were willing.
Yes, I mean, if you look at just the distributions further to the left, if you just look at, if it was just based upon the levy itself, what Honey Creek would receive, it's quite a reduction when you go to the 65-35 split. These numbers were pretty similar last year, and Honey Creek was satisfied with that. And I think they were satisfied in the sense that they were able to help the other fire districts that didn't receive near as much as what they did.
And I know, too, that Sugar Creek's very satisfied because if you look at the runs, and we spoke about that before, they're pretty equal and getting about half, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, based upon the levy, Sugar Creek would not receive much consideration for distribution. But if you look at their run percentage for the year, they're 23.5%, it's almost a quarter of the county, and their levy distribution was pretty low in comparison. You know, this ratio, this weighted distribution allows them to receive more funds that they desperately need there, especially with all the work they're doing out there.
Mr. Mann.
Mr. President, thank you. 3 questions. The dollar amounts that we're being given, are those concrete dollar amounts, or are those anticipated dollar amounts?
Those are concrete because it's based on the amount that was certified for 2020, and because the distribution for 20 was based on 2019. So they're a year behind. So we don't know the distribution amount when we have to calculate this and compare it to get the ball rolled. So, and we're taking, this is what you're going to distribute, and it's taken off the top of what comes to the county.
Okay. Is there, I mean, it's a 42-cent discrepancy, but is there a reason why it's 42 cents different?
I went ahead and adjusted those so that they all divide out by 12, so it's 12 equal installments. Makes it a little bit easier for the auditor's office as far as doing recurring entries, so they can make one entry. It's every month, and they don't have to adjust at the end of the year.
Okay.
And it's 42 cents, so.
Thank you. Mr. President, address the submission process for them to request these dollars? Does that not need to happen then? Or does that still need to
They
take place?
still have to submit, and they have to submit to us by the end of June. That's why it's kind of important to start getting the notices out to the departments so they can make their request to submit to the council. They have to submit by the end of June. Council has to vote on it and submit to the state by September 1.
So there is ample time then for presentations to be made by the various departments.
Yes.
And they will be made before either the committee or a whole council, depending on how it's.
If you want them to come in and make a specific presentation, the guidelines are that they have to submit a written request.
Submit it. They don't have to
So, but
present it to us.
if you want more, that's always an option.
We would be able to inquire. And so if there was a question or something, we could then request information from them. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other discussion? I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Laudermilk, seconded by Councilwoman Wager for suspension. Roll call vote, please. Aye.
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 I would entertain a motion to accept this disbursement. How do we want to word that exactly? Aaron?
I would make the motion that the disbursement combination for the 2021 distribution, the public safety lit lit revenues for the fire protection districts to be the 65-35 split, which is weighted 65% run, 35% levy.
I'll second.
Motion made by Councilman Laudermilk, seconded by Councilman Schweitzer. Any more discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Mr. Auditor?
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Loudermilk,
Aye.
Ms. Wager,
Aye.
Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett.
Aye.
I would now entertain a motion to reinstate our rules.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Loudermilk, seconded by Mr. Schweitzer. Roll call vote, Mr. Bramble.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Loudermilk,
Aye.
Ms. Wager,
Aye.
Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett.
Aye.
Thank you so much, council people. We're just a little bit late, but I think we're okay, Mr. Mann. I think we're getting done what we need to get done.
Okay.
Okay. That out of the way, we still didn't get the reports from standing committees, but we have none reports from select committees. None. So we will move on to new business. Personnel Committee. Councilman Loudermilk.
Yes, thank you, Council President Morris. We have before us reassessments. It's a request to eliminate a part-time employee and create a full-time position. And I will ask Mr. Gardner to present, since it's been quite some time since we heard this.
Kevin Gardner, County Assessor. Thanks to the council people for hearing me today. What this is we've got, reassessment has part-time or extra help account in it that allows for so many hours. Those hours are to be split between Harrison and the county. In the documentation that I set before you, and then the one that was included in your packet, it lists the hours and how they're broken down or how they should be broken down. I have only been able to fill one of those part-time positions. We have to do reassessment every year, 25% of the county. We're covering about 400 square miles. We're covering about 35,000 parcels. So even when you split that down to 25% per year, there's quite a bit there that has to be done. We can't start reassessment until May 1. So the DLGF limits the amount of time that we've got. So currently, I've been doing that with one full-time person, a part-time person, because I can't fill the other part-time slot, so those hours have always just rolled back to the county, to the state in the budget. And I've used my data entry people inside the office. That's not always a function that's available. So by making that a full-time position and giving up the part-time hours for the county, you would still have to maintain the hours for Harrison, obviously, but giving up my portion of the part-time hours, I think it's going to be more efficient and more beneficial to the county. For this year, it wouldn't cost anything. It would just be a transfer of the extra money for the extra help into the reassessment payroll fund. So there would be no extra allocation needed. For future years, it would be at a cost of approximately $15,000 per year, which covers the majority of the insurance. The rest of it was eaten up with the hours. This person really needs to be what they call a level 2 assessor appraiser, because you have to be level 2 to assign an assessment to a piece of property. It's really difficult to get someone motivated to take the education required to become the level 2, and then that takes continual hours every year. You got to do 45 hours every year of study. And without that full-time position, being a part-time person, we lose them as soon as they're offered something full-time somewhere, but then we're starting from scratch again. I just really think that it would be the most beneficial to the county if I could move that to a full-time position and then give up my portion of the part-time hours.
Questions, council people? No questions?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mr. Gardner, can you give us a brief, sort of a couple of comments about the problems that you can't, it's difficult to hire the second part-time person. You have these, so what happens in your office with the current situation in place?
With the current situation, what normally happens is, because each person takes care of their township, so if one person gets caught up in their township, I send them out into the field to try to cover it. I, as the assessor, I have also went out in the field because we just can't do it. My chief deputy goes out into the field. Those are things that we don't have a problem with doing, but when we do that, we're giving up something else that we should be working on, or an education or a seminar or something that we should have gone to. With the COVID and everything that's going on now, there's been extensions applied to personal property. There's been extensions to other deadlines. So now this year, this is going to be even more difficult because we're not going to have any extra time later on in the year, what I would normally declare a slow time where we do the education part. Now we're going to be struggling just to hit whatever deadlines we can. That's one of the issues we've got, the reason I don't think we can continue the way we have been. On filling that other part-time position, the first year I was in office, I ran that position 4 times. The most number of people I had that applied for that position was 4. Each time I hired somebody, and before the day or the day that they were supposed to begin, they contacted me and stated they were offered a full-time position somewhere else. I was not able to fill that position all last year. I didn't even try yet this year.
And my last question, you feel confident that if this is changed to a full-time position, you've got a pretty good expectation that you might be able to hire it?
I have no doubt that we could fill the position. I have been in communications with Kara Wright, the HR person. I will continue to talk to her. What she told me the last time I talked to her was I could take the part-time person that I have now, and because it's the same position, it's just changing from part-time to full-time, I could move them into that position without running it or advertising it. I would definitely check with her and make sure. But I think running an ad for this, there's no doubt. I know the person that's in there now would apply for it, so I will not have a problem filling the position.
Thank you.
Any other questions to this pasture committee? Mr. Loudermilk,
Yeah, I
2-0
think-
favorable?
I think Councilman Mann has a question.
Oh, Mr. Mann,
Thank you
excuse me.
very much. Kevin, give me some direction here. How many people in your office right now are doing this? Your office?
Are doing the field work.
Yes.
I currently have a full-time person. I have this one part-time person. And then I have the person who does my sales disclosures, who I also send out to do some sales verification to help take up some of the slack. And then in the past, when we get toward the end of the year, if we're not meeting our guidelines, I myself have went out, my chief deputy has went out, and I have had some of my data entry people go out.
Okay. So in your office, the actual responsibility for all of this is currently a part-time employee?
And a full-time.
So we're asking to go from a full-time, part-time to 2 full-times?
No, I already have a full-time. I'm going to keep that. I have a part-time I want to move to full-time. So then I would have 2 full-time people doing it.
Right, that's where I was headed, I'm sorry. Okay, so is the other person a Comod A?
The one that's currently full-time, no, I believe he is a comma B, but he is also the supervisor.
So the Comod A then would be the entry level.
Would be the filling the part-time position to a full-time. That would be the entry level.
Okay, and neither one of these individuals has any responsibility with Harrison Township?
No.
So do you anticipate Harrison Township needing a full-time person as well, or are they completely, I'm trying to figure out how you're making this request and they're not adjoined to the request.
Harrison treats their office the way they want. I mean, I have no control over that. I think it would be more efficient. I don't think they've had as hard a time as me filling the part-time position, because they do have 3 part-time people and they scatter their hours throughout the year. Now, granted, they don't work them the number of hours I work mine. They don't require the education that I'm requiring of mine. And obviously they're looking at less parcels, so it's easier for them to fulfill their obligations.
Okay, thank you. You said it needs to be a level 2. That is mandated by the state.
That is not. It is, you have to be a level 2 to apply an assessment to a piece of property, which is part of the problem I've got now. The full-time position that's in there now, who is also the supervisor of my field work, is a level 3. A level 1 or no level cannot apply an assessment to a property. So the part-time guy now can go out and do the field work. He can take the measurements, he can come back and he can give them to the chief in that area. Then he has to look and determine what grade it is, what condition it is, and actually apply the assessment. If I could educate this other person, then the supervisor wouldn't be bogged down into duplicating part of the work. He doesn't have to go out in the field, but he has to duplicate the data processing, because my part-time person is not a level 2.
So your request for a level 2 is a want? It's not a requirement?
It is a want. It is going to be a requirement that I'm going to make in my office, but it is not a requirement with the LGL. It is a requirement for them to apply an assessment, but we're doing it now and they're not applying the assessment.
This job description has that in it? This job description says that is a responsibility that this individual will have?
I would have to relook at my job description, but I thought that I did have in there that they would be required to become a level 2.
Possession of level 1 and level 2 within required time limit.
So it is in there, yes.
All right, let me see it real quick here, and then
It's
I'm
on page
finished with some more.
23 at the bottom of the page. It's the second paragraph under job requirements and difficulty of work. Page 23.
Possession of or ability to obtain and maintain the level 1 and level 2 assessor appraiser certification within required time limits. And I put it in there that way so that I could hire just anybody as long as they were willing to take the classes and become that level and then maintain the continued education to keep it.
So they don't have to come in as a 2?
They do not.
And
what happens if they don't become a 2?
At that point, it would be at my discretion to terminate their employment and start again.
what is the required time limit?
I didn't actually put that in writing because that also depends. I mean, if
Because of
I,
when they offer the classes?
well, you're tied up with when they offer the classes, and then you're also tied up with our busy times. I mean, I can't have them taking the classes to get level 2 in the middle of reassessment. So from May to November, December, they're going to be too busy out in the field for me to do that. From January to May, I can have them start studying. Matter of fact, the part-time person I've got now, he has been studying for the level 1, and I think he's actually ready to be able to take that test.
Do you think you would be able to stipulate the time period that is that requirement in your offer letter or the offer to the person?
I think I could put it to 6 months or a year.
Is that Vigo County policy, or is that
It would have-
consistent with what?
I don't know if they require that on your other, I assume they require it on your other positions. They have their levels, don't they?
None of our other positions require a level
Because they don't assess.
because they don't assess. They do the data entry and they check the values and they talk to the people on the phone, communicate with the taxpayers. They enter personal property, which is a big thing. Keeps them busy for probably 2 or 3 months out of the year just on personal property. But they don't actually assess. You have to be level 2 to actually assess and apply a value.
And we're required by the state to provide a stipend for a level 2,
Correct.
which I think is 500,
It's 500 for level 2, 1,000 for level 3.
and it's an extra 500 for the elected officials. That
Yes, or an extra 1,000 for the elected official if they're level 3.
Mr. Gardner, question. How many people in your office, full-time?
Counting me, 8.
Is there any incentive for anybody else in the office to get a certification for level 1, 2, 3?
The extra stipend.
Yeah, okay. Have you ever mentioned that to any of your people?
I have had discussions with all of my people. As a matter of fact, I had a couple of them the first part of this year that started going through the online documentation and PowerPoint modules to start studying for their next level. I did not make it a requirement. I just let them know that
Right.
if they want to do that, there is a stipend if they reach level 2.
And what did we say? That's $500 a year?
It's $500 for level 2 for employees, 1,000 for elected official.
Correct.
Okay.
For level 1, there's no extra
I
stipend.
was just thinking, with vacations and everything, you got to cover different areas at times, rotate people in and out type thing to keep things moving. Okay. Any other questions? I would entertain a motion favorable or unfavorable or whatever. Is there a motion?
I will make a motion to, well, let me back up. It did pass committee 2-0 favorable, and that was to eliminate the part-time and create the full-time position. So I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Loudermilk, seconded by Councilwoman Wager. Any other comment?
If I may, I want to make
Certainly.
sure I'm understanding this. Tonight in our meeting, can you identify the required time limit, or are you not comfortable identifying the required time?
It's difficult for me to give a required time limit. I would definitely say if the person that takes this position, let's say it approved tonight and I could start a person full-time in June, so we're just throw out theoretical. Obviously, I can't have them working on the level between now and December. So if they have no level, then by May of 2021, I would expect them to be level 1. And then by May of 2022, I would expect them to achieve level 2. If the person that gets hired is already a level 1, then obviously by May of 2021, I would expect a level 2.
Mr. Mann, would you like an amendment to the motion to that effect?
The motion's already been made. I just wish we had a little guidance in terms of other positions, if this is normal to just,
I don't know, I mean, I haven't looked at another job description for one of the deputy field assessors for quite a while, so I'm not familiar with it.
I haven't had to hire any of the deputy field positions since I've been in office because I kept all of the people that were there before. So I honestly have not looked at it, but I do not believe it says anything about
Well,
having or maintaining a level.
But do you have any in your department that have their levels?
Everyone in my office has at least a level 1, except for my sales verification person, and then one girl that was hired a year ago. Well, she was hired before I took office. She has no level, but she's one of them that I've had looking at it so that she could get a level. I want her to be at least a level 2.
So it's not in their job?
It's not in her job description, it's not a requirement, it's just something that I requested stating that I would like her to be a level 2.
But the person that you have part-time, that you anticipate being a good candidate for the full-time position, has his or her level 1 already.
They have nothing.
Oh, that's the person that has.
I've been having them study for the level 1 because I let them know that if this becomes a full-time position, it will be required to have a level 2 within a time frame. And I guess that's my shortcoming for not actually putting the time frame on it. But I just feel it's something that's necessary for them to be a level 2.
And that's different from the other employees in your office, that you don't think the level 2 is as important for them
I don't think the
because of their
level 2,
functions?
because of their function, they're not to assess. I mean, that's not what their job is. But I do use them sometimes for assistance if we get slow. That's why I would like them to become a level 2, but it's not required for them to be able to perform their duties.
okay, so if I may, this position has a specific need for the county. That need includes a level 2 assessment at some point to do the work that is described in this position.
Correct.
Without attaining that level 2, they cannot meet the goals that this position that we're being asked to create requires.
Correct. I do not feel that they could be as efficient for the county, which is my whole reason of doing this.
You hire somebody with level 2, it's a moot point.
Correct. But I can say there are a limited number of people in Vigo County that have a level 2. Most of them are already working in this building. So it would be very difficult to get one of them to take it. So you're almost definitely going to be starting with someone with no level or level 1 at the most.
But this clearly states an individual has this job description, and this job description can only be done by having a certain level. A level 2. What you're wanting them to do can only be done by somebody with a certain level of expertise.
For them to actually be able to assess and apply a value, they have to be a level 2.
I'm good with that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other questions? We have a motion, favorable. Discussion. discussion? Mr. Bramble, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Loudermilk,
Aye.
Ms. Swager,
Aye.
Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett.
Okay.
You answered?
Ms. Bennett?
Wait a
No?
minute, we don't have the vote.
Aye. Sorry.
Thank you, council people.
I'm being kind of hard on you tonight, aren't I?
Way out here at the end.
I'll start there next time.
Yeah, start there. Okay, that concludes Personnel Committee. Have budget adjustment. Mr. Schweitzer, I think I defer to you because you made both the meetings that pertain to these items, correct?
Yes, correct. I had to remind
Okay.
myself, but
That's my only reasoning there. And,
Ms. Miller has something to say.
yeah. Yes.
On page 5 of your packet, there is an additional appropriation ordinance for the position that was just passed.
Oh, okay.
Um,
All right.
I will say that that is not required, and I do not believe it was requested. In your request, it was to transfer existing appropriations to
Wondered
cover
about that.
this,
That's right.
the compensation and the benefits. So additional appropriation ordinance needs, want them
Table it.
withdrawn? Okay.
So you can make the books come out, right? Okay.
Magic pen.
All right.
Mr. President?
And those
I-
transfers would all be in series, so it does not require council approval.
Make sure also, we have not eliminated that part-time position tonight, so that individual still has a job. Whomever gets hired by Mr. Gardner, we may then have to have at some point a discussion, whether it's in committee or budget approval, that that position is eliminated. Is that correct? Those 29 hours.
And probably for budget, because appropriation-wise, he's not gonna have the
Just make the
appropriation
appropriation.
for the position.
For the full-time position.
Or you're not gonna have the appropriation for the
Yeah.
part-time.
They're gonna have the money.
There won't be anything left for more part-time by the time you allocate what you need for full-time. That was approved,
Correct.
so.
So we're not doing anything with those dollars in the 2020 budget. They're just going to be reappropriated for this position.
Yes.
From the extra help to the full-time.
Correct.
So I guess my question to the council is, and I know you just approved the position, when does it start?
Soon as you
It's
get
approved.
somebody hired.
Okay.
It's approved on the 19th, so it's effective tomorrow morning.
But we need to, this additional appropriation was put in there, and we don't need an additional appropriation, so, okay. So, is there a motion to withdraw this additional appropriation ordinance 2020-6?
I move that additional appropriation ordinance 2020-06 be withdrawn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Spence Bennett, seconded by Councilman Schweitzer. Any more discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Aye.
Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Ms. Swager,
Aye.
Mr. Loudermilk.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye. All right. I'm trying to keep this thing moving, but you guys stop me anytime. Okay. Budget Adjustment Committee, then, Councilman Schweitzer.
Thank you, President Morris. First up is Lit Special Purpose Fund. This can be found on pages 6 and 28 of your handbook. This is a request of Council 20-014 for $5 million from the Special Purpose Fund in the amount of, like I just said, $5 million. Mr. Wright is here if we have any questions. This passed out of committee favorable 2-0.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Wright, you just This is something we'd agreed to originally, et cetera,
That's right, Mr.
ongoing
President.
costs.
Thank you, members of the council. Michael Wright, County Attorney, for this appropriation was part of the $10 million self-funded portion, essentially a down payment on the jail project. As Councilwoman Annette indicated, these monies began coming in 2018. When the tax was initiated, those monies have not been allocated for any other purpose, and during the course of the discussion around the bonding, that money would be put towards the project when it was necessary.
Questions? I assume we have an account that we're paying out of right now.
That's correct. Yeah, so.
So where's that account at now? Has that got money in it?
The bond proceeds were deposited with the trustee, which is, for this bond, is First Financial Bank. The way the process works is the contractors performing work on the project every month submit an invoice to the construction manager. Both the construction manager and the architect assess those bills because a lot of those are for materials that are being stored and things like that. They both sign off on those. They come to the county, at which point the commissioners assess them, sign off on them, and then First Financial Bank, as the trustee, pays those from the bond proceed account.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilwoman Mager, seconded by Councilman Schweitzer. Any more discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Bramble?
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Loudermilk,
Aye.
Swager,
Aye.
Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Council President Morris. The second one is Verdeco Recycling Tax Abatement Review. This was resolved by the attorneys and the assessor. It requires no action necessary, so let that reflect on the record. If we would like to discuss that, the assessor is here. If you'd like to say anything, if not, we can move on. Okay. And lastly, encumbrances. This passed out of Committee 3-0 favorable as amended. I will defer to Ms. Spence-Bennett. She can explain this a heck of a lot better than I can on the amended amounts.
Well, thank you,
You're welcome.
Councilmember Schweitzer. There had been a review of the encumbrances that were proposed by Ms. Miller that yielded some specific types of situations that were noted. For example, in some cases, the encumbrances, the encumbered amount included sales tax, which it should not. There was one that included a late fee, which we don't pay. There were a couple of minor incorrect amounts, and there were several other situations. So we reviewed all those situations and discussed them, and ultimately in, I think, 5 of 7 cases, accepted an amended amount for these very specific encumbrances, which were noted, and then just generally accepted the other encumbrances as submitted and reviewed by the auditor's department.
Question?
Couple of changes since the other day. The sales tax, the McAllister cat, the $81 on that. That was an insurance claim, and the county got him reimbursed for the entire amount, including the $81. And so that probably ought to stay on there. And the other sales tax reimbursement's been requested from the people involved.
Okay. What do we need?
Let's see. The Avis rent-a-car, that's backed out of that encumbrance based on a natural accounting process that you go through with encumbrances. So we're all pretty close to same numbers.
So if I may, the 457.93 on Avis, we need to mark that out.
What happened there, they had planned a trip to a conference or something. They paid for their airline tickets and was planning on renting a car when they got there. Then the airline industry shut down. They had their airline tickets paid for, but you don't pay for your car until you turn it in. So in January, they thought they were encumbering something out of the budget, but then when the bill came due, they really didn't have that much, which is what an encumbrance is. If I can give you a little accounting lesson, that next sheet there, an encumbrance is merely an estimate of what a department head thinks the bill on an order will be. And that's supposed to be placed on the books to reserve an amount in the budget. When the bill comes due, you reverse that entry and post the exact amount. So, that's how the process works.
So the auditor's office is comfortable with the numbers that are presented before us tonight.
We've posted the numbers I gave you earlier. They'll be adjusted. We're in the process of going through what was actually paid for those encumbrances, and they will be adjusted back to the actual amount spent.
But on the information here from pages 8 to 13, the auditor's office is comfortable with these numbers.
I'm comfortable with what we gave you. There was this $4,952,236.38 has been posted for encumbrances. Right now, I've got Judy going in the process of reviewing the actual check that was paid for them. 99.9% of them are what was on that encumbrance. There's some of them, and there may very well be others that we will reduce that's not on this list. So that's.
Thank you.
There's no other questions, then I would take
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
President Morse. Let me just clarify. The updated list on pages 9 to 13 of our packet includes the adjustments that were approved by the Budget Adjustment Committee. Is that a true statement?
I'm not sure. They include at least most of them.
Well,
But there were, for example, I think, did this come from Jude? This is, okay. Oh, okay. No, so this is what was presented. Okay, so it doesn't reflect those the changes that are being made.
Okay, so I guess I was thinking that when we approve the adjusted amounts, that the encumbrance list would be changed for those adjusted amounts, and then we could approve that encumbrance list with those adjustments. But because sitting here tonight, I'm not sure
I don't,
how we can approve something
yeah, well,
in a concise manner. Because it's all these adjustments. I mean, we can go back and approve all of the individual adjustments that we made
yeah,
in
well,
the
once
committee.
again, I'm going back to my old thought that your responsibility is to review them. Approval isn't the right.
I thought I guess I thought we had established last time that and approval is the right word. And Mr. Effner, I thought we had asked that, for that to be addressed.
And I disagree, so that's, that's where it stands.
I'm sorry.
I guess I thought that we had established, or at least we had asked you to determine whether the council is approving these encumbrances. And I've thought that we are asked to do that. And have we established that that's the case versus just reviewing?
No, I think according to the State Board of Accounts, they should be approved. On the other hand, you're basically looking at encumbrances from 2019 to 2020. So you're saying that there's some sort of a legal obligation that has been incurred to pay these things that have not, where the debts have not been incurred yet, but there's an obligation there. So I don't, the way I look at it is you can go ahead and approve the encumbrances. If the total is not spent, then it should
It comes off.
go back to the general fund anyway.
Right.
Yeah, if you look at that, how the transaction takes place. There's the journal entry on these black, you record encumbrances and a reserve for encumbrances on your budgetary accounts. Then when the transaction is complete, you back out the full amount of that $30,000 or whatever it was, but if it was $29,900, you record the expense as that, and that extra $100 is removed from, it's no longer an encumbrance, it's been removed. And the $29,900, as in this example, is recorded as an expense. It's a bunch of accounting gibberish.
I guess I'm not as concerned about the accounting practice as I am that,
Well, I am.
when we have,
But,
we have an encumbrance at the end of 2019, we have an indebtedness. And I think we can encumber the money necessary to pay that indebtedness.
Right.
And then if the numbers are different, then that's up to the accounting function to,
Right,
they'll
that's what
they'll revert
yeah.
back to the general fund, the part that's not spent anyway.
But it was mentioned in the meeting that we had on Thursday that the practices in place to monitor the unspent portion of the encumbrance is weak, and that there was really nothing in place.
And it's been that
So
way
there's-
since,
Well, I know there has, but there's been new direction.
Well, it would seem to me that
actually, we're
on the right,
yeah,
that
we're an immaterial amount off. Not gonna make
We-
a hill of beans worth of difference which one you pick.
So if we encumbered $500,000 right? And the bill presented to you had a change order, and the needed amount was $550,000. The council would have to approve an additional appropriation for $50,000, would they?
Yeah, it wasn't budgeted.
You didn't have the money, you can't spend it. So it seems to me like the review of the encumbrances is to say that some of those things that we planned for in the annual budget or requested is a work of
Well, what I'm trying to tell you is that if the bill comes in less than what the amount encumbered was, that it can only be spent for that one particular bill for which it was encumbered. It doesn't live on.
doesn't live on.
It's a,
Again, if a bill was for $500,000 and somebody got the work done for $450,000, that $50,000 would go back into county general, correct?
Correct.
I mean,
it couldn't be spent on anything.
couldn't be spent on anything else. And I think that's a good, and we learn those things when we review this at the end of the year. I don't know.
It very well may be that there needs to be a process developed and agreed upon, but the way I look at it is just as in the 2020 budget, if you've appropriated money in the budget and it's not spent, it reverts back to the general fund, generally.
Except if it's encumbered.
Pardon? Well, I'm assuming that, yeah, unless it is additionally encumbered again, because there is a legal obligation, a further legal obligation in regard to that debt, So I'm assuming that anything that's encumbered would follow that, and was not spent would follow that same process unless there was a continuing obligation,
Right.
in which case you would ask for an additional encumbrance into the following year.
You know, as a member of the Budget Adjustment Committee, I must say, we went through a detailed process to review and make amendments to these specific amounts as noted here, which in my mind reflected on the ultimate total list of encumbrances and called out for that list to be corrected with these amended amounts. I don't see a list here that contains these amended amounts. So unless we want to repeat all of those amended motions from the Budget Adjustment Committee, which I was hoping we wouldn't have to do, what we need is a list of corrected encumbrance amounts based on the amendments voted on and approved by the Budget Adjustment Committee. And to me, that's what the council should vote on. That's what I'm thinking.
Your comment? Yes, Mr. Mann?
Are the numbers presented by the auditor larger than the amended amounts?
In all instances except one.
Which one is that?
EMA and the general fund, which is page 10. Building repair to be 832 instead of 570.59.
So theoretically, EMA is going to have to find another source or come back before us for $261.41. Is that correct? They didn't encumber enough money.
No, it's not exactly correct. What they, what they submitted for building repair,
It didn't qualify for building repair.
let's say that they submitted a total request for building repair of $1,500. And because of the balance in the account, they couldn't, it was only for a part of the expenses that the invoices they had. But when the other parts were denied, then that allowed this particular invoice to go up to $832. It was for the overhead door.
So they do have enough money.
No, because they shorted the encumbrance. There was enough money originally. If you want, I went in and made notes on this list that the auditor included in the book with the amended amounts.
Right, but my point is, if all these numbers are larger than what the amended amount is, we can approve them, and it's going to revert back.
It's going to revert back if they catch it, because they've said they don't have a good process in place.
Okay.
Well, presently, we are correcting that. I've got them going through there to make sure that those amounts are going to be removed.
So it's ongoing.
Yeah.
Mr. Mann, would it be appropriate to just table this until we get a complete form showing the correct amendments at our next meeting?
The only one that I'm concerned about, somebody's going to have to help me here in terms of being more than, if this number is larger, there's enough money to cover it. But on the one that was advertised that was larger,
None of it's been advertised.
well, it was advertised in 20, in 19,
Oh,
and it was approved by the council as those dollar amounts. For whatever reason, they didn't get spent in 19, so the departments have requested that the money be spent in 2020. So as far as we know here, none of the requests are unethical or illegal or whatever. These are
Legitimate.
every day, every year requests that take place. The only exception that I'm seeing in the amended amount is one that's higher than this number. So even if you approve all the numbers on the sheet from the auditor's office, that one account is just going to be minus, that there is some allocation, it's just not for the full amount.
correct.
So they could use some of their money this year with the encumbered money to pay for it.
They could.
The dollar amounts, when you're looking at 4,952,236, and the amended amounts are how much?
I don't have a total.
Talking,
125,000?
oh, no, much
No,
less
much
than
less
that.
than that.
Less than that?
It's the total of the amended amount. It's less than,
37, 39,
it's less
51,
than, probably
10,
You're
less than,
amending-
it's certainly less than $30,000.
20. So it's about 25,000. That's in some sort of dispute. Is that correct?
I don't think it's in dispute. They'll be corrected as that, as we make the entry to reverse to unencumber them.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
What is your, so, what is any council member's pleasure here? Table, accept, deny, or turn down?
Well, I'm reading the notes on the sheet, and the notes are 3-0 favorable as amended. So I wasn't there. You guys, you had an expectation that the numbers would change, but you were not disputing any of the numbers. You were just,
Well, the numbers are incorrect because policy has not been followed for some of these items. And so that's going to presumably be corrected when the amount is paid, but,
you didn't disallow any of them. There weren't any that you said,
well, that's the amendment reflects an amount that was not approved for payment, if you will. That's what I thought we were doing in the meeting. To say, well, you know, on the top gun, you know, the request for 358863, 2309 of that was sales tax. We don't pay sales tax, so we approve a payment of 356554. That's what was in my brain when we were approving these things as amended.
and that's going to get caught by the auditor's office.
Well, to tell you what's really happened is that 358863 has been paid for, and that $23 has been requested to be reimbursed by the sheriff.
So you've already done that. You've already made the request.
Mm-hmm. The $81 for the cat, after further review today, the full amount was paid, however, was reimbursed by the insurance company. So that one's a wash. You know, you just can't look at those invoices that came in at the beginning of the year, or those encumbered sheets, and without going back and looking at the transaction to see what really happened. Because, once again, an encumbrance is merely an estimate that we received in January. And since that point, these transactions have been completed.
So the committee found some miscalculation.
And procedural errors, let's call them, and miscalculations.
But
I mean, the committee, the council administrator found those issues, and the committee reacted to them by specifying the amended amounts.
and it sounds like here tonight, at least in those two examples, whatever the vocabulary is, corrections, changes are being made as we are speaking. So what is our challenge, Mr. President? Is our challenge to say that the encumbrance process is going forth in Vigo
That's
County?
underway.
Departments made a request. Those requests were noted by the auditor. The committee, now the council's being asked to look at the encumbrances in a general sense.
Perfect.
We're not being asked to look at them individually, right? We're being asked to look at them as a totality.
I look at it as a review of these expenses that could be to come out to exact amount when we do our annual budget. We do line items of 100s, 200s, 300s, and 400s, and those amounts can be adjusted one way or another as that department sees fit. I think that the oversight of the encumbrances, now this is just one council member's opinion, it is an important function because we get to go in there and look and see what's going ahead, and some of these expenses are out a month, some of them are out 3 months, some of them are 5 months. But it is precise when the books are closed out, but it's always a running tabulation. That's one council person's opinion. If you do not share that opinion, why, don't accept this.
I share that opinion.
I guess my problem with this is we can make this right easily enough, and we don't have any guidelines for allowing it to be wrong. I mean, I think one of the requirements for an encumbrance is that you have an invoice or a contract to back up an amount.
No,
Well,
no, you need a purchase order.
I think that's an accounting view, isn't it? Isn't it? I thought our
You're
requirement was
talking
that an
accounting now.
encumbrance was to be supported
do you
by,
think?
an encumbrance that could roll from one year to another was to be supported by a contract or an invoice. Is that not?
That is incorrect. Absolutely incorrect.
But we don't have purchase orders, so what else might we go on? What else was,
Yeah.
so the accounting rule is of no note here because we don't have
Yes,
the
it
thing
is.
you're
It's very
referring to.
much no here, lady. That's what the whole thing's based on.
My fear is simply that if I approve an amount that includes something that should not be paid, I'm approving as a council member that we can pay something that shouldn't be paid, and I would prefer not to, when it can be easily corrected, which these could have been, I would prefer not to approve an amount that in fact is wrong. If we're being asked to approve these as a commitment by the county.
If I might add, Lisa, and I may have misunderstood where this amount was coming from, and, I take your point, too, that what you're saying is that the amount that we were asked to encumber for 2019 was not correct. It's not the fact that it's just more than we ended up paying that you're saying is incorrect. And I take that point, and, that's not what I was trying to say when I spoke before. And if it is incorrect, you are being asked to approve something that's inaccurate, and I think your point's well taken, that if that's not a valid indebtedness, which apparently, if you don't pay a sales tax, then it's not, then, I understand what you're saying.
I mean, and again, we don't have a guideline or a rule that says it can be this amount wrong or this amount wrong. These could have been easily corrected. The corrections were identified. They could have been easily corrected. A new list could have been produced since last Thursday, I think. And frankly, that's what I was expecting to have tonight, was corrections that were addressed by, or that address the amendments that the committee called for last Thursday.
Well, let me ask this, because this is a good procedural question. What power does a committee have to direct a change that would be different from the full council directing the change? I understand the committee making a recommendation for the changes, but what power does a committee have with their vote to make the changes? Whereas if we vote tonight to do this as amended, then we are voting for the encumbrances with these changes being made, as our vote would be. So I'm wanting just real quickly here on the powers of committees to have that vote bring about a change.
That the committees don't, the way that I would interpret it is the committees do not have the the approval. The approval was forwarded to this body, and nothing's in stone until this body votes on it.
So might I ask, could we approve the encumbrances as amended?
I don't see why
Just like the
not.
committee did? And that encompasses, as Councilman Mann says, all of these amendments that are matched against the original list?
That's satisfactory.
I mean, I'm thinking that is more along our responsible line to do that. I do want to make sure, what does that do to the process with the auditor's office? If we make the changes, for example, and we do the one that's on here that's, request was 112, but it should be 102. Does that negatively impact the auditor's office?
No.
It does not?
I mean, if that's, I don't have that transaction right in front of me now. They're taking $10 off. I don't have the claim here. I don't know what it was, but if the ultimate payment was $102 for that, the $10 will come off.
So a motion could be made to accept the encumbrances tonight, except for the ones found on page 8. Those encumbrances could come back before this council at our next meeting. Is that correct?
Or you could approve the amended amount.
Approve the amended amount.
You could-
Approve the
you could
amended
approve
amount.
the amendment that's
Be
listed
done
on
with
the
it.
sheet.
And I'm trying to get through this in that, does the council when we do the budget, we've got the requests. These we do not have the requests in front of us.
I've got the packet that was put together for the
Yeah.
committee meeting. That was the ones.
We
that
do
were
have
questioned. Yeah, the ones that were in question.
we are in possession of those.
Yes.
Right.
With the copies of the receipts? So if all I want to find out then now, when we make these amounts official, then the amended amount is what is going to be entered as the maximum number.
What I would do, when I think this would be easier, if you wanted to make it official, you could accept the document that the auditor provided with the amendments listed under sales tax, which is the amended column. So you're going to have that amendment of the sheriff's department to reduce that amount by 2309. You're going to reduce the EMA by 1028. And that way it's really clear on what you're doing. You're applying these amendments to this list.
Right, okay. I'm not. The auditor's office has already The auditor's office has already sent some of these out that'll be larger than the number we're approving
They've not, you mean sent them out to who?
to these companies. Am I hearing that correctly on that first one? That bill's already been paid?
Yeah, probably, I would venture to say they've all been paid.
These have all been paid.
that's coming out of their 2020 budget, not what they're encumbering from 2019.
So basically, the amounts you're changing are totally
This is legal.
immaterial. I mean, they won't, they're not enough to make a significant difference in any, except a lot more work. But as far as a reflection of your financial position, status of the budget, they're not enough to, you're talking about probably less than $10,000 out of $4.5 million. Not very much.
Somebody else is gonna have to get some dialogue in here. What are we saying if we're approving a number different from what a department requested?
What's it saying? I mean, because everything that goes in there is subject to approval. They're putting in a request and it's determined whether they're eligible, whether they met. It was done in timely fashion as far as the right calendar event, 12/31 date, whether they have an appropriation balance sufficient to cover the event or cover the encumbrance.
Mr. Mann, may I ask a question? Mr. Auditor, tell us, in the Top Gun example, since that's one of our relevant examples, so a reimbursement has been applied for. Let's say we approve an amended amount of $35.65, and what they actually paid originally was $35.88, and they've requested an reimbursement of the sales tax. If we approve $35.65, two things could happen. Either they get the reimbursement of sales tax, or they don't. What's the downside, or what's going to happen if they don't get that reimbursement? What's going to happen if they don't get the reimbursement, but we have approved an amount that doesn't include the sales tax as an encumbrance?
Well, actually, the county is obligated for that sales tax. You've been charged it. If you don't pay we send them a check that's short the $23. Suppose they could haul us to small claims court. But most likely, I bet you what'll happen with those from the sheriff's department, he'll probably pay it out of his commissary or something like that.
It's
Mr. Mann,
But
Ms. Burnett, when we go over these things and we do appropriations, they're very generalized. And I look at this as an oversight to look at these monies that are left over after. So when $180,000, say for instance, that's been appropriated in 2019 for purchase of software, and that purchase isn't made in 2019, and that money is encumbered, correct? And when we do our review, then what we're asking is, are you still going to buy this software? And you know as well as I that there's questions about, well, we found out we didn't like those people and we're negotiating with somebody else. And it might be 120,000, it might be 220,000. But we get to review those things, but we don't make necessarily the decision on which software manufacturer we go with. So
Which all these Mr. President, all these dollar amounts were approved.
right.
But the question is, they didn't get spent, so the request is for the money to be spent the next year. I'm struggling with having different numbers and who is responsible for the discrepancy. We have had people in this county have to pay money because of different numbers in different departments. We don't have any guidelines before us. If it were just to say that we reviewed the encumbrance process, that we know departments made a request, that to me is not what I'm hearing this evening, that we are wanting to make changes to those reviews as noticed here by the amendments. And I'm just trying to figure out what the foothold is for this council with numbers that are differentiated.
My recollection, suddenly, I hadn't thought about this, my recollection is that last year, because of some discrepancies, we actually voted to say that we had reviewed the encumbrances. That's my recollection from last year.
We reviewed the process.
We reviewed the process.
This is going a step beyond
That's right.
reviewing the process.
Last year, there were changes, but it was made during committee and they came through that way.
I'm not completely sure about that, Calissa. I'm not completely sure about that with one of the examples in mind.
I know one that you're talking about.
Uh-huh. So I think that's what we
But
approved
it was
was a big
accepted
one,
by
I
the,
think.
as reviewed.
it was accepted by the.
We reviewed the process.
I mean, in all honesty, this is May. How many
It
of
doesn't
these
make any
encumbrances are still even on the book?
It doesn't make,
They've all, I would venture to say that the 100% haven't been paid.
I don't,
But once again, not all what was encumbered. For example, the car. That wasn't paid.
let me try something out on y'all. What if I move that we accept the encumbrances with this immaterial amount of differences, with the stipulation that before we do this again next year, we will write a procedure that stipulates or describes what the process is and what our tolerances are for any kind of errors of this type.
Mr. President, before anybody seconds that motion, let me just make this observation. In the past, the council has looked at, has done what we've done in the past. We accepted the encumbrances. The State Board of Accounts reviews the numbers, and they catch all of the snaggly tooth things that happens if somebody pays sales tax and so forth, and then they settle all that stuff up and correct it. And the council does what we have done in the past, and that's what's happened here. You know, the council has never gone over, you know, with a fine tooth comb kind of stuff. That's how we wound up here in May and on the verge of having to do a budget and so on. It'd be great if we had the time and temperament to go over all this stuff and have it to the penny. But we've never done that in the past. And, you know, as a rule, they come up pretty close in millions of dollars budget, and that's, you know, and that's how this has happened. You know, and Lisa, you've got that eagle eye to catch all that stuff.
Oh, it's-
And
it's
Calissa, and we've just, you know,
I mean,
that is how it happens. But the state board of accounts, when they, you know, when they come in, they catch every little nickel and dime and so forth, and so you know, we must march on and get to the budget, and that's and we do, you know, find this kind of stuff, as Michael will tell you and Jim will tell you. And it's complicated for sure. So, I mean,
An alternative would be to move, as I believe we did last year, that we have reviewed the process and vote on the process. Vote that we've accepted the process.
Do we have a motion? No motion to accept the process, to not accept the process, or anything.
It's just frustrating. I mean,
Accounting's a frustrating business at times.
you know, operating my own business, I can't have this happen. You know, I need everything to be to a T. I don't want it to get to an audit before I realize I've made a mistake. So, you know, that's to me bad business. And not blaming you, Mr. Bram, I'm just saying in what happens in my world, I have to have my numbers correct. So, you know, I will make a motion to accept that we went over encumbrances, and, you know, hopefully next year it'll be better. I mean, Lisa's right, we should stipulate how this works. I mean, since I started coming to meetings when I wanted to run for council, it's been like this almost every year. We get to a point of, what do we do? So, my motion's on the floor.
Which is,
Approve the process of going over encumbrances. Looking into.
is there a second?
I'm going to add a third motion. Because our meeting is just a few weeks away.
Right.
We've had a good discussion this evening. I'm going to motion that we table this until the June meeting with an expectation that there is some analysis on how much is already and how much is left to go, particularly with page 8. And so I'm going to move that we...
I will say that I think on behalf of Lisa and I, that we kind of expected that to happen at this meeting tonight. That we would show that this all equaled out and everything's been taken care of. So I will second that motion.
We have a motion to table. We have a second. Is there any other discussion?
I might add that probably part of the reason that didn't occur is because everybody just
Employment.
came back to work yesterday.
I agree, yeah. No.
The spreadsheet. We have computer.
Mr. Auditor, roll call vote.
You don't have a second.
I second.
Oh, you did, okay.
So what's the,
I made a motion to table this until our next meeting,
okay.
seconded by...
Mr. Schweitzer.
Mr. Morris,
Nay.
Mr. Loudermilk,
Aye.
Ms. Wager,
Nay.
Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Aye.
Bennett,
Aye.
Show the motion moves approved.
Motion to table.
4-2 vote. Okay. And we're through that. Permission, okay, annual budget committee, Mr. Mann.
All right, thank you, President Morris. We have two items before us. I believe we have representation for both of them here this evening. The first item is promotion to negotiate the sale of parcel number 84-06-34-251-006.000-002 to Hydrite Chemical Company. In our manuals, this is request of council. Well, let me look at it here. I thought it was 2,000.
Plus, that's a 20-1.
Let's find out our numbers here.
(20-15).
It's 2000. It should be 2020-04, should it not?
That is the resolution. The
okay,
request of council is the 20-015.
Perfect. The request of council is 20-015. The resolution number is 2020-04. Thank you very much. This passed committee 3-0 favor.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman Mann, Mr. President, members of the council, Mike Wright, on behalf of the county commissioners. This is, the common address of this property is 2200 South 13th Street. It is a 3.68 acre tract that was previously part of the Terre Haute Quarter Midget Track Association campus. This property, in the deed which transferred it to the Quarter Midget Track Association, had a reversionary clause that if the Quarter Midget Track Association went away, this property reverted back to Vigo County. Hydrite Chemical Company acquired the Quarter Midget Track a couple years ago, maybe 3. Since that time, they have been assessing their operations in Terre Haute, and the purpose behind the acquisition of this 3-acre tract is so they can construct a new office space for their the business workers in the operation there. This property is bordered on the south by ground owned by the Terre Haute Department of Redevelopment that was classified as a brownfield site and remediated as such. This property has some of the same issues that existed on the former Coke Carbon site. Hydrite has done a phase 1 and phase 2 of the property. They've estimated the remediation cost at somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 and are in the process of obtaining a comfort letter from the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. So this resolution before you would allow the commissioners to appoint 2 appraisers and to potentially negotiate the sale of that property. I would say at the outset that because of the underlying condition of the property, it's very unlikely that any appraiser is going to give it any significant value because of the costs that come along with remediating it. So, although it might not appraised very high, it will return this property to the tax rolls, and if a new building is placed on it, that assessed value will be captured as well.
Mr. Wright, is there any cost or liability on the county for this cost of this remediation?
No. The remediation, I mean, we are in the chain of title for this property. There's no getting around that. It's history, there's no sense in fretting about it at this point. We are in the chain of title.
Okay.
And up to this point, the most obvious mechanism for completing this type of transfer is typically moving the property into either the county or city redevelopment, because they have much more capacity for establishing a working relationship with a industry in their community. But because of the condition of the property, neither the city nor the county economic development district wanted to insert themselves into the chain of title. So that leaves us with the process that's before you, which is the only process the county has for selling real estate, which is the appointment of appraisers and the not accepting less than the statutory amount. So,
Questions?
I would tell you, I've talked with Tom Miazga of Hydrite, who's based out of Wisconsin, and they are excited about and appreciative of any consideration given this issue.
They've made an investment down there, several hundred thousands of dollars probably, maybe millions.
No, for sure. They have expanded their industrial, footprint in this community. And this is to give their office workers the space back that they lost with that expansion. So that's their stated goal for the potential transfer.
Questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. President, inasmuch as this will, in essence, give the, just set the process in motion for appraisal of the property, I will entertain a motion in favor of this action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Councilwoman Wager, seconded by Councilman Loudermilk. Any more discussion? Everybody familiar where this property's at, history, et cetera, et cetera? Okay.
The only thing that I would say before the motion proceeds is, the county also owns another parcel directly behind this that does have a building on it, and that is not part of this sale. So, there's a lease that the county has in place with Spectrum for that building and some other facilities that they have on that site, and that is not part of this transaction. This is just the 3 acres that sits on the frontage of what is now called Erie Canal.
Mr. Auditor, roll call vote.
Mr. Morris?
Aye.
Mr. Loudermilk?
Aye.
Ms. Wager?
Aye.
Mr. Mann?
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett?
Aye.
Show that a permission was for appraisal of this property moved past 6-0 favorable. Okay, Mr. Mann.
Thank you, Mr. President. Second item on our part of the agenda, permission to negotiate to acquire a 6105.30 plus or minus square foot portion of parcel number 84-0628-202-008.00-002 and a 1734.64 plus or minus square foot portion of parcel number 84-06-28-202-016.000-002. This is resolution number 2020-05 on page 18. This passed the annual budget committee 3-0 favorably as well, and this is next door. Yes, this is for the juvenile center and a piece of property adjacent to where we are now.
That's correct. Thank you, Councilman Mann. This request relates to the relationship between the Vigo County Juvenile Justice Center and its neighbor to the north, the hotel. For many years, as I had been going to the juvenile center when I first started practicing in this community, lawyers, clients, other people who had to be at the juvenile center routinely parked in the hotel parking lot. In 2019, the hotel was sold to a new ownership group, and that ownership group, in the first few months of operation, had some, or his guests had some unpleasant encounters and with people who were exiting or entering the juvenile center, and came over to the annex building to indicate that he was going to construct a fence along his property boundary to protect his guests and to provide the services like he felt he needed to. In hearing that, the property boundaries were assessed, and based on the additional work that was performed at the juvenile center to kind of enhance the security, it was realized that if a fence was built within the rules, it would be right outside the front door of the juvenile center as it exists today. So that was not a very attractive option. Larry Robbins and myself and the commissioners have met with the proprietor of the hotel. He's a very kind gentleman. I think the advances that we've made thus far just have not elicited any sort of response. And we are getting to a point now where, you know, the barricades that are up there outside the juvenile center now, if you leave this meeting and look at them, you know, those are there to prevent people from having their cars towed, which was something that came about earlier this year when people were not heeding the advice of the signs and potentially not understanding where they could and could not park. So that those have been placed out there to give people a very clear definition that this is where the property line is now, and if you park here, you could be subject to being towed. So the way it is now, there is very little room to provide maintenance to the entirety of the building. If you had to, you know, get a truck around the front of it with the car coming the other way, it's very unlikely they could pass there. It's just not a very functional workflow around the building. And there's no parking out front for anybody who may be required to be at the juvenile center. And this would, to a small extent, provide continued, would provide better access around the building and provide few parking spots for the court and the probation officers and all those that are required to go into the building. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
So this is permission to negotiate.
That's correct.
So you've already...
At the boundaries as they currently exist and just created a diagram for him to look at to see what we were talking about. Myers Engineering has prepared a legal description of that diagram, just so, we could show that it's not, we wanted to assure him that it is not a significant portion of his parking lot that he invested in. And it is not. It is, you look at the property on Beacon, you'll see it's an irregular shaped parcel. This is basically squaring it up. And it's, when this was originally platted, this was Harding Street. And, there's a little question about how it ended up that way, but, that's, again, history that can't really revisit. So, I think this is just the first process. This is the first step in the process that would allow the county to send a formal request to the entity that operates the hotel and their legal counsel to indicate that, eminent domain, that's not, you have to first prove that there is a need, purpose for the property. And I don't think anybody is disputing that, but, we want to, I believe the commissioners want to work well with him and just want to try and provide a solution that provides what he thinks he needs for his business and at the same time provides a little relief to the juvenile center and the court.
I see this passed committee 3-0 favorable. Are there any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Loudermilk, seconded by Councilwoman Wager. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, Mr. Auditor.
Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Loudermilk,
Aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you all for your time.
Mr. Wright. This time, no honorary resolutions. Okay, first reading of, oh, here it is. Okay. First reading of summary reference proposed ordinance and resolutions. Okay. Well, I've got the 20-019 E911. Looks like a battery backup system requesting for 911. This is assigned to the Budget Adjustment Committee. I have item 20-022, Juvenile Center creation of a non-reverting fund. Assigned to Annual Budget Committee. 20-023, Annual Tax Abatement Compliance Review. Assigned to Annual Budget. And that's all I've got for assignment.
Mr. Morris, I think you skipped 20-20 and 20-20.
I like for those to go to annual, and review annual budget at the,
Annual review for personnel requests?
yeah, annual review for personnel requests.
You don't want it to go to Personnel Committee?
Nope,
It
not
is the
this time.
personnel-
It is
It
personnel,
is a personnel committee, but it's for the annual review.
annual
All the
review.
other requests.
So 20-020 and 20-021 are Personnel Committee?
And our personnel committee for the annual review, yes.
And 20-022 and 20-023 are annual budget.
Yes.
Thank you.
No appointments this time. Has anybody, council members have things they've seen, heard, questions of other council people? I mean, we've been to webinars, we've been told this and that. Anything that you want to share with the other members?
I did want to say, Mr. President, there was a COVID-19 death at the Warren Village Apartments last night, and that is the second one in just 3 days, which is of great concern. That's at 25th Street, just north of Wabash there, about at 3rd Avenue. That's in my council district. It's low-income housing. The people there ride the bus, go to Kroger's, go to the CVS. They're down on Wabash Avenue a great deal, and they eat in a common area. It's very concerning. So the gentleman who died was 54 years old. He was tested at Union Hospital 2 days before they sent him back home to recuperate at the Warren Village with his wife, and he passed away. Great concern. So,
Any other comments?
Mr. Morris, sorry, Lisa.
no, go ahead.
Next meeting, Melissa McCollister and Tina Simons have reached out to me to maybe come speak to us and present on behalf of Vigo County Mutual Aid. So I will discuss that with you and Ms. Miller if we can get them on the agenda for a few minutes. They've been very proactive and productive in getting underprivileged folks monies and food and things like that, and they even have an application form, and they've received grant monies from the United Way. So they would like to come speak on behalf of what they have been doing.
Well, I think people like that are always welcome at our council meeting during public comment.
I would like to reflect on the Crow events and the Highway Department event, talking about how to estimate and how to develop some numbers that we can use for budget purposes and just review. Calissa, I know that you've started that kind of cash flow spreadsheet. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to what you produce. I think that's going to be for us to try to factor in some of what we've heard in those sessions. For example, the highway guidance talked about a two-month lag in receipts and about I think it was about between a 35 and, or it was 30 and 45% possible reductions. And I think what Calissa is doing will be very helpful for us to assess what that might mean for us. Calissa, do you need any guidance from us to continue that work, or?
I think a lot of it would be, like, how far out you'd like me to go, any particular levels you want me to go. But I've kind of decided that what I'm doing is I'm putting basically a drop-down list so that we can tie back to a formula if we want to change and look at different revenue projection losses. If we think it's going to be higher than this or lower than that, we can see what the impact would be in the same way with expenditures. So you have the ability to adjust those, see those in different. I'll do it on a per month basis. So that's what I've kind of thought about.
We anticipate a little bit of a lag to next year for revenue, right? So won't we have an impact next year in tax revenue? So would we do two, or would we start with maybe next year and the year after, or from?
We definitely want to, we kind of address the remainder of this year, and then what maybe some revenue losses for 21 and 22. I think that nothing is going to be over really quick. I think the one thing that we kind of learned in some of our discussion, or the webinar with LTAP, or it was, I think it's Purdue, which is part of LTAP, was that the highway revenues would drop, and it will hit quicker than the drops we'll realize for the income tax, but they will also rebound quicker.
Yeah, I think they were a 2-month lag, and they were expecting things to rebound by the middle of the summer, I think, with that lag in mind.
I think they were anticipating that you would see a loss at least in May, June, July. And because May would be back to March collection, so, and it may be a little bit further than that, but so it really just depends when people start getting out and traveling more. They're buying gas.
Mr. Bramble, I'm sure you've been made aware, but the commissioners advised me that reimbursement for our computer hack or virus from the insurance company may be lagging or non-existent for certain things. So we may have to come up with additional funding, or we may not get reimbursed for that expense. And before this other virus, that virus was a pretty big deal around here. So those things we try to plan for as best we can. Yes.
If I may ask, does anybody have any comments or guidance for me as I continue to think about the public safety lit and the information I presented to you early in this meeting?
I'm going to wish to thank you. Anytime information is presented that allows us to think, that's moving the ball forward. So even though there are no ideas per se, we do have a vision in terms of the dollars that are going to be collected. We have a vision in how much needs to be allocated for the security complex itself. We still don't know operating amounts for the new facility. And so the information presented tonight, I think, is a very good starting point, and hopefully we can use it to spring forward in many different directions with the ideas that were developed for all four of the funds. So thank you.
That's great. That's good. Thank you.
Well, I thought this was going to be a kind of a scattered out meeting as far as trying to bring it together. I think we've done a pretty good job bringing it together. Get back on direction. I hope we can meet in here June 9th. Not very far. I am sorry, but not surprised.
Mr. President.
Yes.
I can announce that it's been published, right, that the annual budget committee meets at 3:45 tomorrow in here. So our two items that we have,
Yes.
3:45 tomorrow in here for annual budget.
Nothing else, I would entertain a motion.
Second.
All in favor, by aye.
Aye.
Meeting stands adjourned. Sorry, guys.